So today's webinar, we got how to 2x your sales qualified meetings while making fewer calls. We've got myself, Max Altschuler, CEO of Sales Hacker Inc. John Kosturos is in here, CRO RingLead. Juliana Crispo, CEO of Startup Sales Bootcamp, and Kyle Porter, CEO of SalesLoft. Thank you guys for joining us for this. I'm really excited to kind of jam on this topic with you. Obviously technology creates a lot of efficiency, but well-trained salespeople is the only way to ensure effectiveness. We have a lot of tools today at our disposal, and it took a while for us to actually gain adoption and for people to understand that these tools were available. And now we're in this awkward phase where it's all right, everybody's finally investing in the technology but doesn't know how to use it. And so we want to talk more about, Kyle, you wrote an article the other day on making sure that if you're going to invest in sales automation to make sure you have the human touch and, make sure that you're pushing the buttons and you're managing the automation technology and it's not managing you. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about, from data to process to technology, but really about, 2xing your meetings and demos while making fewer calls. And not saying that you shouldn't be calling, but in 2016, life's gotten a little more efficient with some of the things that are available and some of the education even that's available to you. So, Juliana, we're gonna kick it off with you, but want to talk a little bit about you run a program for salespeople, and in that you talk about reaching out to leads. What are some of the things you can do to ensure success by being as prepared as possible so that you don't need to make all these phone calls? You're super prepared. You know what you're going to do. You know what you're going in for.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I actually came from the realm of the world where we had no technology and we were making cold calls constantly. And if your manager saw you doing too much research, you got called out and you kind of got harassed, and it was like, pick up the damn phone, Juliana. So I came from that world, and then now I see this world, which is great. And I just want to make a point that no technology or sales stack in the world can fix a rep with inadequate foundations and inadequate process, right? I was just talking with a VP of sales the other day that's struggling with the challenge of kind of going backwards and kind of added technology too soon, added automation too soon. This is one of the VPs of sales of one of the fastest growing SaaS companies in the world right now. And it's a really expensive problem to make because you actually have to retrain your salespeople on the fundamentals that they should be doing in the first place. So that's something that I'm seeing kind of the backlash of companies struggle with right now. And I look at that and I say, okay, once you have the foundations in place, then it makes sense to layer on the technology, almost even treat the technology as like a reward for salespeople getting the fundamentals right first. So you got to get the fundamentals right first. And I know we sort of live in a world where, Kyle, you have amazing technology, and John, so do you, and everyone's sort of selling their technology, but it's kind of like, Max, earlier before this, you were eating a Quest bar, right? And it's like the supplement industry, right? If you think of the fitness and the supplement industry, we're bombarded with all these supplements you can take to get better, faster, get shredded, and look super good. And yeah, you can take those supplements and you're going to see those incremental returns. But if you don't have the diet and exercise foundational habits down, it's not going to get much better. The technology is not going to fix your problem. So I just want to make that point here. So if we go back to the question of what are the things I do, I think I've done a lot of surveys about this, asking reps, what's the biggest challenge? And they all come back to me with some derivative of freaking organization and just being incredibly overwhelmed. And one of the things that I emphasize in the program that I teach is batching of work. And the thing that I teach is when it comes to pre-research, so going out before you actually reach out to a lead, there's a lot of confusion around what kind of research to do. And there's this law of diminishing returns, right? So if you look at actual sales research, it kind of looks like x-axis is how much time you spend doing research, and y-axis is actual qualified meetings that you get. It's like this. And the chart kind of is more qualified meetings, and then it just drops off. You start doing too much research and you're not getting those results. And so what I often teach salespeople and I show them is that you want to break it down into basically a two-step, two-phase process, right? And when you do that, your mind gets into the habit of focusing on getting research around solving a specific problem. And it's counterintuitive, but here's the two steps. So the first phase is you want to do research around the companies specifically, right? So company-specific research. The mistake a lot of salespeople make when they do this is they start doing research around contacts because they get pulled into LinkedIn. Now, the challenge with that is that we live in a buying environment now where everything is based on consensus around the problem and the solution. So what that means is that if you reach out to a problem that maybe one person on LinkedIn is having, a lot of other people in that organization don't have that exact same problem. So that's why I say phase one, batch like 30 minutes or so of time to just answer specific questions around the company, right? So the questions you want to ask yourself are, one, does this company fall into our ideal customer profile, our customer hypothesis, whatever you want to call it? If you don't know what that means, go into Salesforce right now, look at your closed won accounts and just like look at the most recent accounts and think, oh, companies just like that, find those companies. Second thing you want to ask yourself, most important question you'll ask is, how does this company make money, right? How does this company make money? If you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be reaching out in the first place. But the good news is that like 95% of people reaching out to contacts right now don't know the answer to that question, really. So if you know that, you've got a leg up. The third question you want to start asking yourself is you want to say, okay, you want to think about any trigger events that might be happening right now. So in the news, is there any trigger events that would lead this company to want to talk to me? And the thing you're really going towards is the fourth thing, which is basically, what's my hypothesis around the problem I believe they might have that we can solve that I can get consensus around? Again, not focusing on phase one. We're not focusing on contacts. We're not talking about contacts. We're talking about companies specifically because, again, the shift is more stakeholders, consensus, got to get more buy-in. It's got to be about the company. Phase two, that's when we can start to like troll on LinkedIn and we can start to like look at, oh, this person might be a fit or this person might be a fit. And the way I've always kind of prioritized those contacts is I looked at who can I get a warm introduction from, right? Because I know that if I can get that warm introduction, I will get that qualified meeting somehow, some way along the lines. Like that warm introduction is really essential. I think the stat is like you're 5 times more likely if you're director level of above to actually get the qualified meeting if you go through a warm introduction. So I always prioritize those things first. And the 3 things you're really going to is by batching that, going, I'm just going to focus 30 minutes on company research. Then I'm going to go through and I'm going to focus on within those companies that I've already validated contacts specifically. You're training your mind to be like 10 times more efficient, right? You're focusing on one problem, right? Company specific and then contact specific, because you can't treat the two the same. Like people at companies are different and they're motivated differently than the companies themselves. So you got to kind of batch too. I
can tell Kyle wants to jump in there. He's a good smile on his face. What's up, Kyle? What are you thinking?
I'm always antsy. I was loving what you're putting down. We're talking a lot about the value of really understanding your prospect and your buyer. I think it's got to boil down to what is the velocity sale required for what you're doing. And here at SalesLoft, for example, we've got folks selling into big deals that are going to take a long time, and they need to be super personal and highly customized and very relevant and have done all their research. And then we've got some high velocity 500 MRR deals, and those have got to move faster than doing deep levels of research. And so I think the first thing is just understand what level of investment of time is commensurate with the deal size that you're going after. I think that's a big one that people need to pay attention to. And if there's one thing that I just open up with, for folks to pay attention to, I'll only say it like this one time, but get your ass on the phone. Juliana, when you told me about the environment you came from, I was like, that's the type of people I'm looking to hire. And one more example here, we have 2,000 leads coming inbound every month. We built a sales email tool. We're all over Twitter. If you've seen our Instagram, it's fire. I think they're on Snapchat all the time, right? All those things, 50% of our first meaningful interactions in outbound are cold calls across the entire organization, even with all that other stuff happening. So get on the phone and then understand what level of customization is relevant to the deal size you're going after, and do all of them, but don't have reps that are doing velocity deals do tons of research, and reps that are doing huge deals do no research.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, especially for the newer reps. We tend to newer reps, they tend to get, they use research as a crutch sometimes. There are a lot of companies that I know of out there that have told their reps not to use the phone because of the research that's been out there. Even if the deal velocity is a lot smaller and the MRR is smaller, they say don't use the phone, use social selling, use this or that. And, you could argue for both cases. And the reality is I've been in environments where you've got the cold calling mentality and you've got the over research mentality. And they both it really depends on the deal velocity, but I would say don't be afraid to obviously pick up the phone. I think a lot of people run the risk of burning business because what happens, and this is what happens with managers, is they say, pick up the phone, and then you've got these reps that don't know what the F they're doing. That's where you run into really big problems, and you burn leads.
Well, and the buyer persona matters also. If I'm selling to VPs of social media, you better believe I'm going to be all over Twitter. And if I'm selling to a VP of construction or a general contractor at a construction company, I'm going to be hitting them up on the phone all day long, right? So it also matters who the persona is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think, I love how, it's all about the company, right? When you're in B2B sales, like you mentioned, Juliana, it's like figure out how they're making money, figure out what's in the news for that company, and how it relates to the personas that you're going after, right? Because if you're in front of your prospects, knowing exactly what their company is trying to attain, right, then when they go back into those board meetings or those weekly meetings, and they just had a conversation with somebody about how to directly impact a key business strategy, then it's more likely that you're going to be able to get in the door because you're now engaging that company on how they can accomplish their goals instead of the goals that you're trying to accomplish with them.
Right. And those should be all the questions when you get someone on the phone. It shouldn't be about what your product does or what your service does. They should be, hey, John, I'm talking to Juliana. You said a hypothesis of need. I'm talking to other VPs of sales and software companies. They're telling me they're struggling with X, Y, and Z. Can you relate to that? Like I'm making a hypothesis. If you can relate to that, then we can help you out. This is the kind of thing that we help out every day. So you're like leading in with that kind of shared truth that the buyer might have.
Yeah. One thing that's really interesting too, I think there's been some stats published around this is that, and you had a product around this back in the day, right? Remember job change alerts?
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah. So it's like, so back in the, and this is still true, this still rings true. I think the stat is people spend 80% of their budget when they move to a new company, right? So you want to talk about getting qualified freaking prospects, go to a prospect that just moved into a new company. Yeah. That person is way more likely to spend money with you. And
new people buy new things.
New people buy new stuff all the time. And so that's something that I know, if you kind of do it in a roundabout way, you can figure it out on LinkedIn. My friend John Coons taught me that not too long ago, but that is something that a lot of people are doing. And when reps talk about overwhelm, right? So that's one of the big challenges that we deal with is we say, okay, so how can we go through all the contacts that you have in your priority accounts right now and say, this person is probably going to make a lot more sense to spend time reaching out to than this person who's tenured at the company for 10 freaking years, probably loves the status quo of the way things are. Spend your time on this person, right? That's your mobilizer.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, so again, I alluded to that article that you penned the other day, and it was about keeping the human interaction in sales while still using some of these automation tools, acceleration tools, whatever you want to call them. What's some advice you have on doing that tactically? I mean, as far as keeping that human interaction there, again, like we're talking about today, making fewer calls, just doing it smarter. We're not talking about not doing calls at all, right? So what's your advice there?
Well, yeah, let me tee it up for a minute. Mark Andreessen wrote an excellent article on Wall Street Journal, and it said that software is eating the world. And from that, I kind of derived this idea I mentioned in the blog post that when my daughter Brooklyn, who is 2 years old next month, when she gets older and when she gets old enough to understand it, I'm going to tell her there are two jobs in this world, the ones where you tell the robots what to do and the other one where the robots tell you what to do. And I hope she decides that she wants to go in the one where she tells the robots what to do. And what's happened is that the world of automation has given all these products that managers can come in and they can program up, and it can tell the rep what to do. And it can tell them to click buttons and send mass emails and blast out everybody with maybe a template that says, hi, first name, and I notice you're at company name, and maybe you have this title, and try to get some of that templatization in it. But really, that's just a spam blast tactic. And what's happening is buyers are getting more sophisticated. They're getting more contacts from more of us on using more of these systems. And heck, I even built one of these systems, so I'm guilty also. But what's happening is that we have to break that mold of being told by the robot what to do and use these systems to our advantage. The reps need to be able to grab a sales acceleration product, an email, a phone, a data system, and be able to manipulate it to do what they want it to do. Thereby, the analogy here is it's not Terminator where you turn on the machine and it just goes off crazy. This is Iron Man where you put Jarvis bracelet on and the helmet. You still have your heart, you still have your head, but you're going to work. And so tactically, which is the question you asked, Juliana touched on this, understanding their business, understanding how they make money, understanding how to navigate a conversation to quickly get to their business objectives. Because when you can uncover their business objectives, you can start asking questions like, oh, you want to double sales this year. How are you going to get there? Well, the resources you have in place allow you to get there. What about this? What about that? And just sit back and listen. But there's also lots of great products out there that help you get more intel on the people that you're dealing with, help you inject that into correspondence so that you can more rapidly email. We don't want to cut off all scale by increasing sincerity. We want to increase sincerity, but still allow you to contact the 50, 40, 70 people that you need to reach out to each and every day. But this is certainly not a, push a button and send out 2,000 emails, push a button and make 200 back-to-back phone calls where you don't even know how to spell the company's name when they answer the phone. And so I think there's a lot of things, and we can get into more of that, but the mindset of think from a human perspective, how do I connect with this person in a way where I can break down the barriers so that I can ask questions, so I can uncover their objectives, so that I can ultimately solve their problem. That's really what's important.
Yeah. John, what do you think? I mean, what do you have your team doing that's special? You guys are obviously a vendor in the space on the data side mostly, but you're plugged into all these other vendors. I mean, what do you have your team doing tactically that's, I don't know, putting them a step ahead or making them more efficient, but keeping that human element?
Yeah, I mean, the human element is all about, like you said, less automation. And if you don't have silos of highly targeted prospects that are similar to each other, have similar problems, maybe they're competing with each other, if you don't have those silos, then you're just going to be email blasting cadences and, dialing multiple people that you can't personalize the outreach on right out of the gates. So for us, everything goes back to the data, and it's like our marketing and our sales leadership clearly define where our different teams should be focusing their prospecting, and then once they've focused their prospecting, we clearly define what the messaging should be for that segment, right? What case studies should be presented to them, what ebooks should be presented to them, because all of those assets are being utilized to, again, solve that business's problems, right? Too many companies, too many reps focus on how they're going to make money, how they can get a sale through, what their technology can do, and they don't focus a clear approach on a segment of people that have similar problems. They run in similar crowds, they go to similar trade shows, and they all have similar problems. And so if you can find those segments and those groups, then having that data in place for your reps allows them to use the automation but still be highly personalized and not seem like they're just blasting people.
Yeah.
I've seen it with RingLead customers who pull down their contacts, run a cadence with an email template, and one of the most popular strategies right now with fast-growing tech companies is to run a 10-80-10 email out to their prospects. And what that means is that 80%, the middle 80%, is already templatized, right? It's already written, but that first 10% and that last 10% get customized. And so if a customer is using RingLead and they pull that contact information down. Now they've got the LinkedIn profile right there. Quick click, pull it up, grab some information, throw it in that 10%, throw it in that bottom 10%, hit send, and now you've been able to and do it time after time after time after time. So now it's a couple hours, and you've been able to send 40 really personalized emails where the person opening that email, they know for a fact that a human sent it. Whereas so many 90% of the emails now, for a fact a robot sent it, and
it's
humans are looking for
semi-automated.
that. That's the first thing I look at.
Yeah, it's semi-automated. It's a great way to do it. It's something that we talk a lot about at Sales Hacker. I mean, there's so many technologies out there that even allow you to pull dossiers at scale. You can upload 100 leads, and you can get a dossier on someone. At least if you're going to cold call and go down a list, you have some information for you before you do it. You want to talk about making fewer calls. Make the first point of contact. Make sure that's a good call. And if you want to make sure that's a good call, you want to make sure you have some research in front of you. I mean, if you're down a list, I mean, even taking one extra second to go look at that information before you click send or dial is going to help you, I think, drastically or significantly. So, Kyle, staying on you for a little bit, what, you guys talk a lot about social's role. What's social's role in this whole thing?
It's another touch point medium. So the whole idea of, modern selling is that we're going to go after a certain number of mediums with a certain number of touch points over a certain number of days. And I think most people have kind of seen, and it's been on the Sales Hacker blog, this idea of like a 7x7 strategy. Don't get hung up on the numbers. It could be 9x13. It could be 5x20. But the whole idea is how many touch points over how many days. And now introducing some other variables, you introduce what mediums, phone, email, social, maybe direct mail, maybe direct advertising, right? So there's other mediums. And then there also are different buyers at the end of the customer. So you might do 7 phone calls in 7 days over 3 different mediums, but there also might be 4 personas at the end organization that you want to be hitting up. And then last piece, you might have people inside your organization also reach out. So for example, my SDRs, they'll call VPs of sales all day long and directors of sales, but then I'll reach out to the CEO or the board members. Or Derek, our VP, will reach out to their CEO. And so it's multi-point selling to a multi-point buyer. And then covering those. That is, yeah, absolutely. So that's something we've kind of added in the last 3 or 4 months and seen a lot of success with. I'll go on and see who do I know that knows the CEO, who do I know at my board level that might know someone at their board level, and we'll leverage those introductions. Now, we don't do it for the $500 deal, but we do it for the $2,000 MRR deal.
Okay, so that's your threshold. 2,000 and up was what you do for that, and that would be for like venture-backed SaaS companies or for everyone. I mean, the guys at Caterpillar or pharmaceutical companies or something like that, or is that mostly in the venture?
I'll do it for anyone at that size. There's less likelihood my venture capitalists are going to know someone at Caterpillar than they are at a SaaS company. But I'll do anything for the rep for $2,000. I'll go do their laundry for them and pick them up some chicken wings or something, right? Like I'll do work for that. But I think social is a big piece. The last thing I want to do, and then I want to hear Juliana's perspective on this. We talked about triggers, and one that's not directly social but is driven by social. We use a product called Crystal Knows. I think you all might be familiar with this. So this is a company out of Tennessee, super neat, and it's integrated into our product like RingLead is. And when on a phone call or sending an email, this system takes the email address, finds all the relevant information they can about that person on the web, whether it's through Twitter or Facebook or a blog post they've made or social APIs, and they classify them into one of 74 psychological profiles. And then they spit that out on the screen. So while I'm on the phone, it might say, make a joke here, or this person prefers to get straight to the point, or don't use a lot of don't bullshit this person, right? And so it gives that information so that you can be more sincere and meet them on their level. And so it's a really cool thing. One of the examples of ways to be sincere and personalized.
Yeah, Crystal Knows is BS. Like if you look at my profile, it says I'm a really nice person, which is not true.
Oh yeah.
The last person that told me it was BS. Someone told me it was BS, and then we look up their profile and it says this person will be skeptical about new technologies.
It's actually pretty accurate. It's actually pretty accurate. So I found Crystal Knows to be accurate, but it's kind of like like, again, law of diminishing returns. It's like minimal kind of thing. So when you think about a salesperson's time, it's definitely a fun thing that we've seen people play around with. And for sure, if you're going to do a high leverage touch to somebody that's like really important, absolutely check it out. It takes 2 seconds. But for those of us that are doing more high volume outreach and got a lot to do and trying to make, the most of our time, like I haven't really seen that much of an incremental value from that kind of information.
But it is brand new, and you did say 2 seconds. You said 2 seconds.
Takes 2 seconds, yeah. So you can look at it, but again, think about all the crap that salespeople have to deal with. Like they're overwhelmed because they're in Salesforce, they're in this tool, they're in that tool, they're in this tool. And the more kinds of applications you've got on their desktop, the less productive they're going to be. Like the ideal scenario, and I'm sure you've experienced this a lot with all the VPs of sales that you reach out to, is they want their people in like maybe a few tabs, not having this like tab mania all over the place, because studies show multitasking is literally like the brain capacity that you have when you're multitasking is the equivalent to a human being high. Like you do not have the brain power to multitask all those things. It's like operating on a day without sleep, right? So people want to get reps to a point where it's like they're not doing all these many things and all these things at once. And if you're going to use something like Crystal Knows, my thing is batch it out, right? What are the 10, 20 contacts you want to reach out to tomorrow? Like make a freaking 20-minute thing of it on your calendar that says boom, 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 go through the Crystal Knows things instead of constantly gear switching back and forth, because that's where you lose steam. That's where you lose momentum, and that's where you waste a lot of time.
Well, walk us through what you teach, in your program, a rep when they're reaching out. What do you go over outreach?
Yeah, of course. So a lot of what we're teaching is we break module 1 down basically in the program into something called the customer hypothesis, which is just basically a data-driven process to go through and figure out what your ICP is. So oftentimes it's kind of going into Salesforce and it's like looking at who is their close won deals sometimes, or it's looking at customers that they recently talked to, and it's unpacking the data that they've got on those customers to find other low-hanging fruit around them that's going to be more likely to close or more likely to want to have a meeting with them, ideally more likely to close. And then the pre-call research, what you're doing, again, you're answering those 4 questions I talked about in the beginning. So do they fit into the customer hypothesis? Yes. Cool. Great. Move forward. Move on to step 2, pass go. How do they make money? Can I answer that question intelligently? Are there any triggers that have happened recently that are going to make this conversation relevant? Because again, if you're leaving those voicemails or if you're sending those emails and you're talking about you and your product, you're like 99.9% of other reps out there doing that same thing. No one's going to want to talk to you, and you don't seem interesting and you're not adding value. And then the 4th thing is what's the problem hypothesis that you can solve for them, right? Because what happens is they're going to get your email, they're going to listen to your voicemail, and they're going to be like, hey, Max, come on over here, listen to this, right? Because that's how decisions are made now. They're going to forward your email, they're going to forward your in-mail, and they're going to say, look at this. What do you think of this? Should we take this meeting? And then in a snap second, it's either decided or it's not decided that they care about your company or not, literally in that snap decision, in that snap second. And so then that's what leads to this waste of time with reps going around and saying, oh, well, I'm not getting any love from this company. And then they just keep putting energy, all those cadences, all those touch points. And in fact, I'd argue that you don't need that many touch points. If you've got the right problem hypothesis, you've got the right company, just freaking do 2 and you're set, right? Like from all the research that we've gathered around this, like if you know who you're targeting, if you know who you're going after, you don't need that much more you need to do. You don't need that many more touch points. Of course it helps, but again, you got to start with the right foundation, right?
Kyle. Look, I hear something.
I want to hear from John.
John,
I'm enjoying it.
I just see you nodding.
I've seen Juliana.
Like, it looks like,
I'm agreeing. Yeah, I've seen Juliana teach folks, and we've had customers that have come to us from Juliana's workshops and been blown away by the work that she's showing them. It's really cool stuff, and you understand this stuff deeply. I love it. Yeah, I mean, if you can get away with only 2 touch points and you're doing pretty well, right person, right time, right message, you're going to have a pretty high chance of success. Well, that's going to be tough to always do that. Of course. John,
tell us a little bit about the playbook that you've got your team running. So Kyle was going through his playbook before, where he's reaching out to the CEO, his team's reaching out to the champions and the end users, whichever approach that they're taking. Do you have like a deal triangle or something that you guys are doing where you're kind of tag teaming accounts? Is it an account-based sales model? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to break inbound and outbound efforts into kind of two segments, right? So with our inbound, that's handled by a team that really knows what to say, when to say it. They're reacting to people's questions and what they're inquiring about. But for our outbound, we want our reps spending, let's just say, at least 50% of their time going after their target account list. And you can call that account-based selling, account-based marketing. But with that approach, right, you've got a small subset of what we would call dream accounts, right, where if you brought on, let's just say 30% of 100 of these accounts, you're a rep, you're going to change your lifestyle. You're going to help double, maybe triple your company's revenue because you're going after the biggest deals that are going to have quicker velocity. They're going to buy more. They're going to buy more often. They're going to stick around for a long time. And so we put a dedicated effort onto that Dream 100 for each rep. And it's part of our training program where going back to Juliana, you have to know what type of companies are the ones that you are going to go after. And then what are the 3, 4, 5 different personas at those companies that you should be engaging with? And touch points, I mean, I think that, I take a line from Chet Holmes. I don't know if you guys know him, but great sales coach. And it's pig-headed discipline, right? You're going to be hitting multiple channels to connect with these people, whether it's direct mail. B2B direct mail works great, especially when you're working with the higher end, right? You've got your emails, you've got your phone number, your phone calls, you've got the marketing messaging out there targeting these accounts with, advertisements on their LinkedIn profiles and their Facebook, and you're putting this really highly targeted messaging in front of these people, and the reps really know that they have kind of air support coming in and helping them attack these 4 or 5 different people at an organization, solving a specific problem. And so really their cadence mostly is picking up the phone and really trying to do educational-based selling. So they've got maybe a core story that they're presenting to that buyer that's specific to what a VP of sales is going to want to, hear. You've got something for the marketing professional. You've got something for the CFO to explain how they're going to, save a bunch of money or create additional revenue. And then we do have our executives come in and start to engage over the top and say, all right, we're going to help out with that CEO interaction. We're going to go straight into that CRO or invite him to an event in, a golf event or whatever it is that they're interested in. But if you can get your reps to each have their own segment of target accounts, that they have multiple people that they're responsible for keeping up to date in the CRM so that all those channels can continuously interact with them intelligently, then, the percentage in which you get those accounts to an opportunity stage will exponentially increase. And, your team's ability to, maintain that account over time is just so much better because you have so much information. There's been a dedicated effort into what they're interested in, what problems they're trying to solve, so that when that relationship does get passed off to customer success, you can land and expand and utilize that relationship.
Do you have them looking for certain things? So one of the things that we've been doing lately, when we're going after bigger accounts, is just trying to find anybody in the organization that shares like a hometown or a university in common with either myself or the one sponsorship guy that we have working for us. But you find that if you can basically come in on that like brotherhood level, so it's somebody who is from your hometown or from your university, people have that like a really strong bond about that for some reason, some big trust factor. So we'll go into an organization and go in through that door to try and get connected to the person that we want to talk with. Is there anything in your playbook, or any, kind of plays that your team runs in order to do that? So it's like, all right, you got an introduction to somebody, you create that bond, like, hey, went to, the same college. Would love to get in touch with this person. Can you make that introduction for me? Can you facilitate that? Has that been working for you? Have you seen, any individual plays, if not that, something else that you guys run?
Yeah, I mean, we do focus a lot on the person, right? The first thing you do is you go into your own LinkedIn and see how you're connected with them, because you may have one of your own buddies that knows them. You're like, hey, hook me up with this person. Let me have a good conversation. So that's the first place. Then the second place is like you go into their bio on their LinkedIn, and you look at their Twitter feed and see, what they're talking about, what universities they went to, what groups they're involved in. Try to engage them in things that are really relevant to them. But what I found in B2B sales is that it really does, everything comes back to the company. So it's like, while I want to tell my salespeople, focus on the person, get those, those specific interactions with people that maybe you can get an introduction to or you have some sort of resemblance with. But again, it's going to come down to the company and their mission, right? Yeah. What are they really trying to accomplish at that point in time? So, the playbook is, what technologies are they using, right? Yeah. Did they just get a big investment from a venture fund that we've worked with in the past, right? We've used techniques where, I did a webinar with a venture fund. I don't want to mention their name because I ended up going to their website, mining all the companies off of it, and then putting it into out in my BDR team, like, hey, go talk to every one of these companies and explain that we just did a webinar with so-and-so about how to create a sales compensation plan, and here, we can help you with this. And the return on that campaign was so huge because those companies were so familiar with that venture fund that they're like, hey, anything that they say goes. So again, I always push that B2B, playbook back to the company.
Yeah, you touched on a few. Go ahead.
Over, Kyle.
First.
I was just going to say, you touched on a lot there, which I think is key. I think, the thing is that you use the personal connection to move the deal forward, right? So Max, like you touched on this, and John, you touched on this. You can use that personal connection to move that deal forward, but people aren't, as we know, people don't care. They're not going to buy if you went to the same school as them. They're not going to buy because of this reason or that reason. It doesn't matter how much the price point is. They're just not going to do it because they're going to look dumb in front of the company if it doesn't tie in with their initiatives, right? Their personal reputation is on the line. So at the end of the day, the company buys, and you need that consensus to buy. So that's why I emphasize looking at that problem hypothesis in the first place. And, one of the things that you mentioned too, is you talk about this, John, is with content, right? Leveraging content to teach, to tell a story about, to get your foot in the door with different things. And I think that's something that for example, a lot of startups don't have the luxury to do right now. But if you're a salesperson and you have that support of your company doing that, use it, leverage that stuff.
As sellers, the very thing that we want to do the most is we want to be able to ask our prospects questions because we want to uncover their objectives and their pains and the opportunity. But in order to get to the point where we can ask questions, we have to earn that right. And now we can earn that right in a number of different ways. Some things like humor can earn that right. Shared connections, a shared past or history, or working at the same company. But what we found that is the best way to earn that right is to show true business value, for them to trust that it's worth staying on the phone with you another 2 minutes. Now, I have a funny one that I remembered when you mentioned the colleges and hometowns. I've got a guy on the team named Chris Smith, and Chris was one of our top SDRs. This is in the early days of SalesLoft, and he went on LinkedIn and prospected every single salesperson with the name Chris Smith. He turned it into one deal. It probably was worth his time, but it was a kind of a one-shot hit, right? But he was using that just to open the conversation enough up so that he could earn their trust through business value, so that he could have a conversation. Now, like 2/3 of Chris Smith weren't our relevant prospects, so we had to go back and figure that one out. But you got to earn the right to have a conversation. There's a guy that all of us know. I'm not going to mention his name. I think he was having a bad day one day, and one of my sales guys called him, and he started to basically cuss on the other end of the phone. You haven't earned the right for this call. You haven't earned the right for this call. And while he was totally out of bounds and wild and crazy and rude, there's some truth to that. We have to earn that right, and we can do it through some rapport, and there's a bunch of ways to do it, but true business value is the best way to connect. Yeah,
I agree it all comes down to the company at the end of the day, but again, like you said, to get your foot in the door, sometimes you got to try things that are a little bit outside the ordinary to connect on something that's completely different, there's a trust factor behind, or to send somebody a link on on Twitter that's like, hey, saw you tweeting about this, thought you'd find this relevant. The basic stuff. The guy's on Twitter tweeting about his football team just won the Super Bowl, and to be able to follow up a month later about like, hey, is your quarterback going to be a free agent or something? If you show that you are actually paying attention to this person, that's a foot in the door. The company stuff comes once you've earned that right to have that conversation, to ask those questions. So
I think
it's one of those kind of first steps.
You become in the 1% by doing that.
I think that's a really good point, especially for somebody who's new at an organization too. It's like the newer you are, the less likely you know how to solve all these business challenges that we're talking about. So like when you're new at a company, and I see this all the time with my own reps, like we'll pull somebody out of healthcare and they'll be like calling all the healthcare companies out there because they can speak their lingo and they have connections there. And like Kyle said, maybe they pull one or two deals out of that list, but they wouldn't get any if they were just focusing on companies and sending these cadences that they really had no thought leadership or no reputation to back them up as an individual that's going after that conversation. So I think as you gain a reputation in your business and in your, the industries that you're selling to, it's a lot easier to come in with, hey, let me solve your company's problems, because they're going to look at you and be like, wow, this really intelligent person wants to come solve my problems. But when you're newer at a company and you're really trying to set up sales appointments, it's like, go guerrilla and figure out how you can use what you're already good at now to really, interact with people at businesses that are going to be able to make a buying decision. And whether that's, hey, I just came from healthcare, or I played on a football team, whatever, or I went to this school, use those tactics because they're very helpful when you're new.
Yeah, the fastest way to learn is by doing, right?
Yeah.
I like the idea. I like the idea of breaking through the noise. This is one way to break through the noise. We've talked a little bit about in the past, and Max, you and I have talked about this, is the whole idea of pattern interruption. So all of our buyers are sitting out there getting the same blast emails, getting the same stupid voicemails, getting the same terrible cold call introductions. And if we can break that kind of, the everyday normal with something that kind of shakes them up a little bit, we have an opportunity to get in there. I'll give you an example. I was sitting in my sales development room. I sat in there for 3 months straight because I wanted to feel it and be in part of this thing we're doing. And I found myself asking, hey, I keep hearing these guys and gals, crash and burn on some of these cold calls. How would I do it if I was making a cold call today? And I realized I would ask something wild and crazy to get them kind of thrown off their game a little bit. So we started to analyze cold call introductions. We created 4 different cold call introductions, measured them, put them in cadence so that when the call happened, they would drop down and record which call intro they were using. And the most successful one was, hey, John, this is Kyle Porter from SalesLoft. What did I catch you in the middle of? Literally, that's it. And then what happened is these people would be like, I'm walking to, and it would just start that conversation because it wasn't, hey, John, this is Kyle Porter from SalesLoft. We help companies convert more target accounts into customer accounts through phone calls and email. Like, that doesn't work, right? That's just a sales pitch. But this opened them up. It was like, oh, you kind of caught me off guard a little bit there. All right, what do you have? I got 2 minutes. What do you got?
I love that. I think your goal should be on that initial call or email to get a response. You get them to respond to you so you have an interaction, and that's a great question to open a call with. I really like that.
A lot of the questions that I teach and everything that I do is backed in neurolinguistic programming, that pattern interrupt, that whole idea. That's the psychology. For the nerds on here like me, that's kind of backbone psychology. What we're doing is we're taking what people are normally in their grind of doing and we're just stopping it with the pattern interrupt. And it's exactly how you can completely shift a sales conversation from not going in your favor to going in your favor, no matter where you are in that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's all they're all stepping stones, right? So you're trying to get in the door to ask for the right to ask those questions. You're trying to ask those questions to get to the next step, to the next step, to the next step, to eventually sell a deal. So you go into, your first call, your first touch with the next step in mind and not trying to close the deal all at once, you're going to have a lot more success. And I feel like I have this conversation a lot with people that are like, it's not about going in and trying to close the deal right off the bat. It's about going in and kind of, again, like earning the right to ask that question, then earning the right to, do your demo and move it on to the next step. Talk to the right people, earning the right to get past that gatekeeper and on to the next step. So I think we made a lot of headway today and definitely dropped some knowledge bombs on people. I think we have you guys kick ass, so much value from Laris Orman over here. Some people, Juliana is my hero, by the way. So we got nice opener, Kyle. My favorite is, hey, it's James from Ready Talk. Do you have just a second? And pause. So we got some interesting things over here. Here we go. Question for Juliana. We'll get into some questions now since we got about 10 minutes left. You mentioned the ideal customer profile or customer hypothesis. Can you elaborate on what are the basic steps to start creating that in an environment where you don't have a consistent, regular type of customer? Thank you so much, and hello from Brooklyn.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to kind of say without knowing much about how much contract value you're doing and what you're selling, but general gist of this and the things you want to look at, I give the analogy of Salesforce in the early days, right? So Salesforce in the early days, they were selling big whale deals, right, which Mark Benioff loved. But then there was also selling a lot of these little small deals that were not as attractive as the big sexy whale deals, but they were just as good, and they took a lot less freaking time to do. And what they did is they made a big freaking bet. And I think Benioff talks about this in his book, Behind the Cloud, very briefly. And he says, okay, one of the guys at the company, I think it was like their head of growth or something, he comes back and he says, I want us to make a big bet. And the big bet is this. We're going to focus all our sales resources on going on those small companies. And I'm talking companies less than 30 salespeople in the organization. And that's all we're going to freaking do for a year. And over the course of that year, they like doubled their sales results. They took their team to like 60 people in 6 months, and they had explosive growth from there. And now they're obviously Salesforce today, but it started by focusing on those SMB companies. And what they explicitly did is they said, okay, look at all the companies that we're selling right now. Who's got the shortest sales cycle time? And how can we just duplicate that process over and over again? So that's one way you can do it. Look at all your accounts right now. Who are you closing? Who's got the shortest sales cycle time? And what's the easiest thing to close? Like that's going to, like, time is our most valuable asset. So if you can just close more of those, then you're in much better shape.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can just look at, you probably have some competitors, right? So try and figure out who their customers are, complementary products as well, figure out who their customers are. A lot of bigger competitors will have customer pages. You use products like Datanize and whatnot if you're, in B2B SaaS.
There's an old school tactic that I like a lot. Let's say old school tactic. Let's say you sold a company and they were in the digital signage software industry, let's say, and you have this company as a happy customer. You just go to Google and Google search digital signage software, and you grab the 10 companies that are advertising on that term, and you send them an email saying you already have this one other digital signage. I mean, it's old school tactic, but it works in a lot of scenarios, so it might work for this person.
I use keyword research. If you don't have customers to pull data on, right, there's standard Salesforce reports that I could send, out that you want to run for finding your ideal customer profile if you have customers. But if you don't, like these guys are saying, look up the competitors, throw them in a keyword tool, identify what keywords they're paying for, what keywords they're going for organically, then do your market research, right? Because they're trying to solve problems in that market, and then try to correlate that to business size, revenue, where are they located. But keyword research and those, analysis tools that'll tell you your competitors' keywords are very good for identifying where and why they're, promoting.
At Meltwater, like back in the early days, again, old school tactic, it was as simple as going through magazines, like buying magazines, and we would look at the print ads, and we would say, oh my gosh, this company's spending money on print ads. I wonder how that's working for them. Or we'd listen to radio, like, how's that working out for you? And we'd make the argument of saying, all right, you're spending a lot of your marketing dollars on print ads right now. Maybe you should be moving more of that over to digital and maybe social media so you can actually track the value of what you're spending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had more people asking for some good call openers. Anybody have some good call openers they'd like to share off the top of their head?
Kyle does.
This one's specific to us, so maybe it's relevant to you. I'm not sure, but since we sell email and phone dialer software for salespeople, we're calling in the sales VPs, and we want to know how they feel about cold calling. So I would call in and say, "Hi, Juliana, this is Kyle Porter from SalesLoft. How do you feel about cold calls?" And then just be quiet, and then just let them talk. But that's another one we've used. I think they've got to be for your specific business. I heard one of our customers, and this worked pretty well. They would call in, and they were a relatively well-known brand. They were like a mini brand, so some people knew them, some people didn't. And they just say, "Hey, Max, this is Kyle from SalesLoft. Have you heard of us?" I haven't tried it yet.
No, and then
Yeah, I mean, anything's better than just like fumbling around and not knowing what you're going to say. I mean, I get so many calls from like pretty reputable SaaS companies. Obviously, being at Dreamforce, you get a million calls after that. But that are just people like fumbling around, just don't have anything prepared. It's crazy. So I don't know. If I'm a company right now, I have maybe 3 or 4 that I'm testing out. And I'd say always, pick a winner and then compare that, test out something else that's pretty close to it. Pick a winner, keep testing things. Test things across your team. Maybe you'll have different results, guy or girl. You never know. So keep, trying things out. See what works for you, but there's so many different ways to go about it. I think we got
Max,
time
I
for one more
think
question.
the first time we connected, you cold called me, and then we were the biggest sponsor of Sales Hacker that first year. And Max cold called me, but I didn't respond until he cold text messaged me, and I loved it. He was like, "I'm at Dreamforce. I'm going to meet you at the bottom of the stairs, like 3 p.m." And I'm like, "All right, this guy's hustling. I'm going to do it."
Kyle had red pants on. Remember that? He's like, "I'm in the red pants." That was a bold move. You're at Dreamforce. You need to be able to stand out. I remembered you 2 or 3 years later. All right, last question. So you have a large territory with very little inbound, selling sensitive data security. How would you scale out your outbound approach without doing this? The spray and pray model.
I'd like to answer that. I think I'll throw a shout out right now, and anybody who's going after large accounts, target accounts, should read The Ultimate Sales Machine, because what it's all about is it's about putting a core story presentation together that's going to scare the you-know-what out of whoever is on the other line. You have a very sensitive product where if they don't use a product like yours, a lot of really bad things can happen. So the core story approach is to put together an educational briefing on the 7 dangers that are facing so-and-so, and if they're not utilizing cloud-based security, put it in front of people that manage those processes and lead in with an educational resource rather than any sort of pitch. You invite them to maybe a presentation or a lunch and learn. You can come into their office. But what you're doing is you're pitching a core presentation that's going to educate them on the dangers of the actual problem you're solving and not taking any action on it, instead of pitching a product or service at them. And it's much easier, even if it's a blog post or an ebook that you wrote that you can send to them after you talk to them about it, it positions you in a place where if you get them through that material, they're going to know exactly why they need you. And you're going to be, if you position it with market research that's validated by resources that people trust and go to often, you're going to be looked at as a leader in that space once they're finished engaging with you in that content. So I really would say, hey, anybody who wants to go out and target accounts, read that Ultimate Sales Machine book, because you can basically script call scripts and the core story right out of that book.
Awesome. So I
came up with an idea.
Go for it.
Yeah, so you're selling security software to security officers probably at your buyer accounts. one thing I would consider is take your organization and go through one of the most stringent security reviews you possibly can with the third party to get a certification, and then lead with details of that certification. But you have to be able to get through that, right? So open up your doors, let the compliance people in, have them analyze your business, give a big stamp, SOC 3, compliance, SAE, whatever it is, and then lead with that on the calls and on the emails, because a lot of times these security officers, they geek out on that stuff. So get them excited about like high-level security review type stuff.
Excellent. We got to wrap it up, but we will have this recording posted on saleshacker.com towards the end of the week. Stay tuned for more updates on that. We'll go down the line. Kyle, Juliana, John. Kyle, where can we reach you, and what do you want people to know real quick?
I'm just Kyle at SalesLoft.com. I'll reply to any emails from anyone that watches this.
Awesome. So Kyle Porter on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay. Juliana?
Yeah, I'm Juliana Crispo at Startup Sales Bootcamp. So if you I think my email is just julianacrispo@gmail. But what you got to do is you got to go to startupsalesbootcamp.com and you get on the email list, because that's the only way you get access to all my best stuff. I don't really blog. I don't do anything else. If you want the magic, you got to get on the email list. So go to startupsalesbootcamp.com.
John?
At John Kosturos. You can get me on JOHN at RingLead.com. Also find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Love to build the network, and I share a lot of great content through there. But similar to Juliana, I mean, RingLead's got a great blog that you can subscribe to and get a lot of data quality information, how to build an ideal customer profile, how to maintain your list, how to dedupe, all that stuff. So follow us there, and you'll learn a lot of great things about maintaining data.
Yeah, SalesLoft, RingLead, Startup Sales Bootcamp, and SalesHacker.com. We'll see everybody next time. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks, guys. That was awesome. So much value. We'll speak soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.